Hey everyone, if you've been following my stream, which is in the description along with everybody else in the channel, you've probably seen over the past year and a half I've been streaming Yakuza and enjoying the whole series as a whole. I first started with 0, and I did have a struggle starting it a long time ago, probably 6 months before I actually started really streaming the series. I tried it, but didn't get into it because of the half-hour cutscenes. But after watching YouTube, I saw the humor in it, and that attracted me to the series and gave it another shot, and ended up streaming that game for that whole year and a half so far. And this game does have everything. If you like a mafia storyline, soap opera style storylines, this has it, along with a lot of mini games, gambling, and just weird stuff I can't even explain. So this has everything. Throughout this, I have seen the high and low points of the series, and I figured to compile my own list of worst to best Yakuza games. I do have a couple notes before I start doing this, is that I only played the Kiwami versions of 1 and 2, and the remasters of 3 and 5. There's not much difference between 3 or 5, but 1 and 2 were complete overhauls from the PS2 versions. I also read that if you really like this series and want to play 1 and 2, they only recommend that diehard fans do it, because obviously the graphics don't hold up and you're playing a PS2 game, which the controls may not be the best. I may look into this if I can find cheap versions of the game. I doubt I will dive that far. I will also note that I captured all the footage in Premium Adventure because, of course, I had the idea when I was playing Yakuza 6, and going back to replay all these games, which took me about 300 hours, was not feasible. So I attempted to get the best I could. I will also note that I did attempt to keep the story information to probably like the first couple hours of each game. So try to limit the spoilers, but obviously I am going through the whole series, so there's going to be some spoilers. But I did try to lower it enough where you can actually still enjoy the game. So let's get into the list. In my personal opinion, the worst game of the series would be Yakuza 3, which came out in 2009. This game mainly dealt with Kiryu running the Morning Glory orphanage. This game also introduced the mechanic that I did not like at all, was the chase mechanic, where you run down an opponent or you get chased from an opponent. This also introduced the revelations, where you get to expand a move or unlock moves by capturing a moment and guessing the best tagline for your social media. We also have Haruka with her request, which this is the game that had it pretty much throughout the whole series. Haruka's request is in all the games except 6. They're usually at the Premium Adventure, where this one actually had it throughout the game. So this was the big time I really noticed this. The plot of the game is to fight over land to build a resort or a military base, which Morning Glory Orphanage is on. And this kind of brings Kiryu back into the Yakuza. This game also introduced the character I probably liked the least, which was Andrew Richardson. I just did not care for this character at all. Also, this game is known for Rakia. This is a guy that calls you Anarchy throughout the whole series, and he is very famous in the meme community. This was the first game on the PS3 originally, and used a very new engine, which this shows heavily. This is the most awkward feeling game in the series because it had just like older textures. Again, this is PS3, so a lot of like the reaction bars looked pretty basic. And again, this remastered version didn't change anything like the Kiwami versions did. I remember constantly dealing with running into things and adjusting the camera a lot, so it just felt clunky. Both the chase stuff and revelations needed fine-tuning, which they were corrected in later series, but when they were introduced here, they were a little rough. The game's sub-stories to me this was the worst of the bunch. They just weren't interesting. I remember one where they tried to make you learn English and they tried to scam you, and I just did not get into them like the other games in the series. And the revelations were annoying because you had 3 lines to pick from for a headline, and if you missed it, you had to go back and redo the whole cutscene again and guess the next one. So it was no big penalty except replay, but it was not fun to do that either. Overall, I did like the new location they set you in. Morning Glory was a nice orphanage to visit and meet all the kids. and adjust to the island. So I did enjoy the new beach vibe, but the city was not as memorable. And also the story just didn't grab me. It was very large scope and heavily into politics. Again, the game introduces you to the orphanage, which is referenced in later games, so it does add context to the other games. And I'll admit, this game was a toss-up between the next game, but I ultimately decided 3 was lower on my list compared to the next one, Yakuza 4, which came out a year later. Yakuza 4 was the first one to introduce other playable characters. So you get to play as Kiryu, also Akiyama, which is a loan shark, Sejima, which is Majima's sworn brother, and Tamamura, the cop. This game also featured some longer sub-stories for each of the new characters, and continued the same game engine that we saw in 3. So the plot here kind of revolves around Sejima and the crime he committed back in the 80s, and the effects of that leading into some of the conflicts that are happening into the game. Playing as the new characters was a nice treat because they each had their own style. Kiryu was a all-around like more boxing and more well-balanced character. Akiyama was kickboxing. Sejima was your brawler and weapons, picking up heavy objects. And Tamamura was more your judo character, so it was fun to actually play as him. I did like the new characters, and it helped see different views of the story. When you play these multi-character versions in Yakuza, they're separated in basically giant sections. You play as that one character. I did feel when this version of the game 4, when they all came together, it was kind of forced, but it was passable. Obviously, they had to tie it in, and this was their first time doing multiple characters, but you could tell it was the first time. To me, I did like the story a little bit more in 3 versus this one, because there's a lot of branching, and honestly, looking back at it, the story, I don't remember as well as I do 3. But what made this one higher rated was the gameplay was really improved and more polished interaction. There's a lot for you to do in this one with all these new characters, and it takes a while to complete the game. The sub-stories here were improved a little bit too, and just doing sub-stories with the other characters helped. Kamurocho, which if you never played the series, this is basically the main level of all the games in the series, except Like a Dragon. And this one was cool in 4 because you kind of just stay in Kamurocho, so they upgraded where you could go on rooftops and the underground and really fleshed out the city, the most you'll see in the games of the series. And basically, this newer, polished version is what made this one better. Next up we have on the list is Yakuza 1 Kiwami. This takes place in 2005 when the original game was released. This was released in 2016. And you're just in Kamurocho. You follow Kiryu as he went to jail for 10 years for a crime he did not commit, to be released, and basically the center of the story here is 10 billion yen is missing from the Tojo clan. This is the first game in the series, and this is where you meet Haruka, which is basically going to be the adopted daughter. Kiwami updated the game to use the engine from Yakuza 0, and the improvements are huge. In addition to the game, the Kiwami series did add more cutscene to Niski to explain a lot more of his experiences going on while Kiryu was in jail. Another feature, for better or for worse, was Majima everywhere. This system would have Majima appear literally anywhere. He would pop out the sewers, he would pop under from a traffic cone, he would be a cop, he would also be your taxi driver. It was insane, all the places they put Majima. The system was very interesting, and I did enjoy fighting Majima, but it was scary because he got stronger the more times you fought him, which he had multiple health bars. So you almost had a mini-boss that would randomly appear on the map. So I always had to make sure I had enough heal items on me, and when I saw the cutscene, I did get nervous. So I think it did bring the fear to you, but obviously, it took a lot of effort just to keep fighting him. They also continued a fighting minigame, which they changed the name to Miso King Battle Bug Beauties, which was a huge improvement over the original one from 0. So here, leveling up your character was different from Zero. And the reason I'm bringing up Zero because this game was right after it. This one, you would get a counter for points, and it made the leveling up system a little easier. You also had multiple fighting styles to use. This was introduced in the Kiwami version. So Brawler was your standard fighting. Beast was slow but good with large weapons. So think of Beast as Tsujima's fighting style. Rush is a very fast-based attacks. And then Dragon style is like Kiru's signature style, which was just more powerful. And the game does do a cool start where you start off very powerful, and then when you go to 10 years in jail, you lose all your power. So that's how they explain resetting your character. And that's when Majima Everywhere kind of appears. The story was okay, but not the strongest. It was a very simple story, and it was basically designed to introduce you to the characters. The missing money plot was okay, but like I said, it didn't really grab me as much. And there was just times in the story I felt frustrated at what happened. But I guess that's good that I was frustrated at some parts because I was into the story, so that's usually a good sign. And it also introduced you to how people can evolve in this game or be gone instantly, similar to like Game of Thrones. So it was nice to get introduced to this. Basically, the scenery, you're stuck at Kamurocho, which makes sense. This is based off the first original game, so I wasn't expecting there, but I did like this update a lot. Next up, we have Yakuza 6, which was 2016. And this was called Song of Life, which was the last game we played as Kiru as the main character. So this ended the Kiru saga. This is also the first game to use the new Dragon engine, which is the current engine at the time of this recording. The engine introduced extreme heat mode where you're unable to be knocked back and you would get heat actions after doing a combo. And this also does the leveling system that I like the most in the game, which is you have 5 types. You have strength, agility, sprint, technique, and charm. And they're the various different colors. So to level up, you have to do certain things to get more strength, for example, to get powerful moves. So to do that, you could do that by just fighting people, completing sub-stories, or even eating at certain restaurants. And the type of food you eat would affect what points you got towards everything. So example, meat kind of gave you more strength. And you use these points to do the upgrades like I mentioned. And I did find this system the best versus all the other systems we were introduced to. The story here is just Kiru after getting out of jail. Obviously, you see a theme in these Yakuza games where Kamurocho becomes unbalanced. And the main leaders are now in jail after an arson attack on Little Asia. So here you are introduced between this conflict between the Chinese Sao Triad and Jiguan Mafia. So you got introducing of basically Tojo Clan versus these other 2 groups, which I found very interesting. The game also starts off with Kiru finding out that Haruka was hit by a car on a hit and run, and she was found carrying a kid, Haruto. So you actually got some scenes with the baby and some mini games too. And basically this leads Kiru down to explore the city that only appeared in this game, Onomichi, and you meet a whole new cast of character like the Hirose family. And it was very interesting characters at this place, and I enjoyed the fresh cast. Onomichi is probably the worst expansion city that the series introduced to me, just because they actually made it real life. If you're unfamiliar, all of the cities in Yakuza are based off real places in Japan. Onomichi is a shipping place where things do close at night early. So you have night scenes where nothing's really open. There's a lot of dead zones. So it didn't feel as fleshed out, and it did annoy me. But the new characters you got there, like Onomichu, which is very big. You've probably seen that character appear many times. Really drove this place for me, so that was at least refreshing. But I did enjoy going back to Kamurocho. All that being said, I did enjoy this a lot. The story was pretty good for a finale for Kiru. I did like the 3 different factions in the city and gave a nice touch to the story. And basically the Haruka start and this story really gets to you if you played the whole series, because basically this is the girl, like I mentioned, that you watch at since Yakuza 1. So you build a bond with Haruka, and they hit it pretty good on that to accommodate the fans. I really enjoyed the new mini games. I liked the new gym thing, spearfishing. There's bar chats where you get to learn about people. There's a baseball team building game and clan creator. And those basically 4 last ones I said take a lot of time, even hours. So they were pretty fleshed out. The new engine was really enjoyable. I liked it. The con here and the joke is usually the extreme ragdoll physics. You'll kick someone and they will go super flying. The new leveling system is one of my favorites, like I mentioned during that segment. So I did really enjoy all these new updates the engine brought. Next on the list, we have Yakuza 5, which came out in 2012. In Yakuza 5, this continues the uniqueness by not only allowing 4 playable characters, but you get 5 playable characters this time. So what they did is remove Tamura, so he only lived in 1 game. And they brought in Shinada, a baseball player. This game has 5 cities to explore, which is the most in all the Yakuza games. And now this, you got the Kamurocho, of course, and Satonbori, which is another big city in this series, along with 3 others. And this was the introduction of the Heat Climax, where you would get special heat moves under special conditions. The story here was interesting, and this is my best attempt to least spoil it. So basically, Kiryu is now working as a taxi driver, and you meet up with Dojima, who becomes missing after trying to patch up a truce between Tojo and the Ami Alliance. Tsujima is in jail, surprise, and works to escape to help Majima. Shinada is a former baseball player who got in trouble for reading calls on his first pro game and was banned from the league and is working to figure out the truth. And Haruka is in a J-pop competition where she's working in the Princess League to become the next J-pop star. I did wait to review. Haruka is a playable character, which made this game oddly good. So the 2 main additions kind of revolve a little bit around her. The first up is the dance battles. I don't know why this grew on me, but it did. So when you play as Haruka, you don't run around fighting. I don't know if y'all would be disappointed by that, but the game people didn't want to do that, so you just dance. So you have dance battles and do performances, and that became fun and a very interesting break to all the beat-em-up style game they had. Overlapping this feature kind of with Haruka trying to become in the Princess League, you get a long sub-story. Everyone else has these very long sub-stories. Like Kiryu, you do a lot of taxi driving missions. Tsujima, you're actually doing a lot of hunting. So you're going out in the woods, hunting deer, bear. Again, Haruka has the Road of Fame for the technical name. And then Shinada has a baseball thing called Cost of a Swing. There's also some crazy new side missions where you can run a ramen shop. There's a snowball fight and just other things. So this is a very fleshed out game that made this game very huge. This is the longest game that I think personally, if you want to do 100% to complete, you're going to spend some time here. There was so much to do and a lot of variety, which I liked a lot and didn't like deteriorate the story. You could run off to do the sub-stories at your own pace and didn't feel like you got lost in the story much. The story was a huge improvement over 4, and the arc synced up pretty well. As you can tell when I did the story summary, everyone kind of had their own thing going on that got merged in, which I felt was way better than the forced approach that happened. Again, this game's still done in arcs where you play as one character for about 4 chapters until you get to the finale. The new engine is great and made transitions smooth. Fighting was a lot smoother, and I enjoyed that. Again, the sub-stories was a big improvement here with the long sub-stories, and plus there's sub-stories that took a while to beat and were pretty fleshed out. Again, playing as Haruka was awesome to me. At first, I thought it was gimmicky, but I did enjoy it. And again, it's just meaningful from playing through this series and having her around all the time. Having her a playable character just was fun to do. Also, I did like this game that you could actually eat food and gain a double health bar. So a lot of prep battles, I would go and eat and increase my health bar, which I did like that mechanic as well. Obviously, all these new places just made the game feel massive and you were exploring everywhere. The hunting section I talked about was its own map. You also have these one-time sections like the jail you play for a little bit. The new characters are likable and enjoyable, especially the baseball. I did like the improvement over some of the mini games. So baseball, with the introduction of Shinada, was greatly improved and made it fun to play that. And like I said, this one just became well because it took 4 and improved it slightly and made it pretty good. Okay, so the third best game in my opinion is Yakuza 0, which came out in 2015, and this is set in 1988. As you can tell from some dates, some events have already happened. They released this to be a prequel, and this was the first game that kind of came over to the West, along with the initial release, to help get fans in the US involved in this. If you're unfamiliar with Yakuza like I was, it was around forever, but it's been like 3 years ago since I was introduced. And again, you have 2 main locations, Kamurocho and Satonbori. So instead of experience points, this game uses money to upgrade a tree progression. The game also introduced you to Mr. Shakedown, which is a very strong enemy that will take all your money if you lose to him. But he carries a lot of money, so there's a pro and con to him. And this is the first time in the main series you play as Majima. A very big deal in this game. He's one of the best known characters other than Kiryu. And also, this had long sub-stories of Kiryu running a real estate and Majima can run a cabaret club. This also introduced the multiple fighting styles that we've seen in 1, but the game actually were introduced here. We already went through Kiryu, who had the same with the loss of the dragon style, where Majima had Thug for a balanced combat style, Slugger, where he used a baseball bat, and Breaker, which was his breakdancing one, which was actually kind of fun to play, and you can see where his style from the other games came from. The story here takes place during the Japanese real estate bubble era in the 80s, where all the gangs and real estate agencies are trying to buy this one empty lot in the center location that could control everything. It's a very special lot and high on everyone's radar. Kiryu gets tied into this by committing a crime in that empty lot, which drew a lot of attention to there. Majima's story is he's working at the Grand Cabernet Club and is trying to get back into the Yakuza, and is basically ordered to commit a hit in order to get back into the clan. First off, this game is high on my list because of the story. This is my favorite story in the Yakuza series. Weird it's third ranked on this countdown, but this is my favorite story. It had nice plot twists and carried well a lot of the characters I liked in this story, and I got heavily involved in the series. This was the first one I played, and this is what really drew me in. And you also got to play as Majima and learn a lot more about him, and I did like that as well. So if you're looking for probably the best story in the Yakuza series, I highly recommend playing this one. Just be careful, you might get hooked like I did for a year and a half. The second reason is the era this game takes place. The 80s was amazing for this time for the game, the setting. Karaoke here was probably the best music I played in this game, in my opinion. Even though the karaoke gameplay itself was not the favorite style I liked, disco was also in here, which was fun and cool to play. Just the 80s all around was nice for an Yakuza game. The cat fight minigame, which I mentioned on Yakuza 1, here was pretty much random and very annoying. If you're 100%ing it, this is going to be your frustration. And the tree style was just weird to read and just took out a lot to max out. I had a lot of trouble like completing the tree. I even beat the game and still had a lot of the sections that were still locked for me. Okay, the second best Yakuza game in my opinion will be Like a Dragon, that came out in 2020, the latest entry in the series, and the first game to be turn-based, which is the most interesting fact. This happened because of an April Fool's video they released in 2019, and people actually loved that style. And they actually kept the turn-based style in this game. The other huge change here is this is the first game without Kiryu, so nice time to change the whole combat style and gameplay. And instead of Kiryu, you play as Ichiban. And this is also the biggest cast of playable characters at 7. You get Namba, who is a nurse, Adachi, which is an ex-detective, Psycho, which is a hostess, along with 2 other characters I'll try to avoid talking about. Eri is also a optional character who comes from the business management sub-story, which I do recommend getting if you want that 7th character. She is actually pretty helpful. The game introduced jobs to change the type of characters you have that are similar to like the normal RPG classes, but I will admit this game is far from normal. They have a lot of the core mechanics and core classes, but their names are different. And this uniqueness made the game fun to me. All the attacks I liked and were enjoyable, made me laugh. And there's a lot of jobs and moves that you're probably seeing now that is very hard to explain. And I will just let them play. But you have the hero job that's like kind of an all-around base class for Ichiban. You also have like hostess and fortune teller, which is more like mage style. They also have the concept of weaknesses and some elements. So you have like fire and ice, and along with attack styles like blunt and blade, which enemies can be weak to. So a very simple layer there that made it also fun to play. The story starts off with Ichi taking responsibility for a murder that lands him in jail in 18 years. Once he's out, he has learned everything has changed and is basically starting from nothing. The story is really good, and I enjoyed the size of it. And I think this is the longest main story I played in all the Yakuza stories. Not to get confused with the Yakuza 5 100% time that I mentioned. This game also introduced dungeons and a battle arena to help test your skills, and a great place to grind to level up. And you will know these areas pretty well. A big plus here is the side quest. You have Dragon Kart, which is a good racing game that is heavily based off another racing game, but I had a blast playing it. Business management was fun and simple, and I got into it. The board meetings were amazing. Can Quest is a cool little Pac-Man style game that you collect cans. And then you go to a theater to fight the Rim Rams to try to stay up. And you also have a vocational school, which you literally take tests. So there was like stories for everything, as you could tell, and I liked pretty much all of them. I did not have many dull moments, and I can't even recall one right now. The story was good here, but not my favorite story. I do place this about second on the storyline, but the comedy here was nice. This new Ichiban character allowed the game to be more fun, instead of the side quests being where most of the comedy comes from, and that played to me very well. I enjoyed that a lot, and like I said, that's how I got into Yakuza, was seeing all the craziness. I enjoyed learning new moves. Anytime I leveled up, I had to try the new move, and the bad guys were unique, and there was a lot of different bad guys, and just seeing some of them come up was just interesting. I would say this is the most fun I had in the Yakuza game, and I generally don't like turn-based games. Also, this was nice because you got to increase bonds with characters. So you would go to the Survive bar and you would have basically a whole side story chapter with each character to do stuff and learn about them, which was cool. And messing with the jobs were fun, and trying to figure out like what is the best combination. I was very entertained by this. So now let's get to the best Yakuza game in my opinion, which will be Yakuza 2 Kiwami. This came out in 2017 based off the 2006 game. Big additions from the original here, minus the obvious graphics, is an addition of 3 chapters of the side story for Majima, which you don't have to play, but if you played Zero, they are heavily based off a lot of the story from Zero. And as I mentioned, Zero is my favorite story, so I really enjoyed these Majima addition to help clean up that story. There's also the addition of Majima Construction, which is a wave-style RTS game, which you kind of defend real estate while you're trying to build Kamurocho Hills, and a lot of real estate people are trying to take over it, so of course the only way they know is violence. We also see the return of the Cabernet Club, where you compete in a Grand Prix, similar to Zero. The story here is really straightforward. Basically, Kiryu's coming back to the Tojo clan after an Omni Alliance murdered a chairman, And this is where Kiru meets Goto, who is the Dragon Kamsai and is the rival of the game. We are also introduced to a fan favorite character, Sayama, who is a detective whose main goal is to take down anything related to the Yakuza. Overall, the story is pretty simple and has enough development to keep you hooked. I was entertained, but the main thing here is Goto is probably the best antagonist in the whole series. The interaction here, since he is a dragon along with Kiru, who's the dragon of Dojima, is a nice setup. So it's dragon versus dragon, and like I said, this is like the best villain in the series. Kind of high up there actually in a lot of video games. I wouldn't say he's top 10, but he is very good villain and works well against Kiru. The final scene and fight is amazing, which is around 40 minutes of video and a lot of fighting, and just the build up to it was wonderful. I just liked having Goto this main antagonist. I also enjoyed the gameplay a lot, and it's the final like action adventure style game, and is approved on the latest engine, so everything was smooth and looked amazing. The mini games were fun here and took the best of the older ones and touched them up to be better. So we had these updated sub-stories, and just the combination of this package was great. This would be my go-to game to play again, and probably to recommend if people just want to try out an Yakuza from somewhere. This is because it has the latest engine still, the best villain, and you get introduced to Samya. The only game that beat this story really was Yakuza 0. I would recommend that for the story, but with the gameplay and all, Yakuza 2 would be my favorite game. So there is my list. Let me know if you would change anything, and I will probably go back to playing Like a Dragon to finish up everything and play the last post-game dungeon. A lot of grinding for that one. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed. Peace.